Hello everyone, my name is Zach. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well today. Today, we are going to be talking about the July book for the Papercut book club hosted by Jordan Harvey, Paperback Dreams, and ReadWithCindy, and that is Unwind by Neal Shusterman, as chosen by ReadWithCindy. Now I want to give a real quick message to Cindy since she chose this book. Cindy, first of all, if you watch this, hi. Now, I'm really happy that you decided to try to find a new favorite book instead of going with an old standby like Cat and Jordan. You probably only did that because you guys already covered the Six of Crows duology, so you've already covered two of your favorite books, but we're going to ignore that for the time being. I can appreciate that you tried to find something new and exciting, but at least for me, I don't really think you hit the nail on the head. In fact, I think you kind of missed the nail entirely and ended up leaving a big old hole in the drywall. But it's alright, we still love you, and keep trying, and I'm sure you'll get it next time. I got faith in you. You're awesome. Alright, so that being said, let's get into this book and my problems I had with it. Now, on Jordan Harvey's channel, she has a review of Divergent by Veronica Roth, and that review kept coming to mind while I was reading this book. In that review, she says something along the lines of, if you read this book and you don't think about it, you might have some fun with this book. And I think that phrase applies pretty well to Unwind. The plot, it's decently well constructed. There's some highs and lows, there's some good twists in there, it's structured well. Some of the characters are a little cliche, but they're well written, they have arcs, they have depth, and so I think if you read this and you don't think about it too hard and you enjoy it, I can kind of understand why. That being said, I'm not that kind of person. I read books, I think about it. I think about the world building, the small details, the holes in the premise and the plot, and when I look at this book with that eye, it kind of falls apart. This first section when I talk about it is going to be completely spoiler-free. I'm going to talk about it only in vague terms, and then I'm going to cover a few things at the very end that are spoilery, but I'll give you a spoiler warning first. Alright, so first let's cover the world building of this book. Alright, so when you first start the book, you're greeted to this page, which is basically the premise written out for you. If any of you watching this video are writing a book for the first time, I want to highly discourage this. This is basically him spoon-feeding his world building to you like it's the opening narration to a film. Basically what it seems like is he took his bulleted list of like important things for his world building, and then he just turned each bullet point into a complete sentence, put them in an order, and then just threw them on the page. This is the laziest world building you can do. Please, I beg of you, don't do this. Find a way to work it into conversation or into a character's thoughts or, something. This is an info dump that's not even in context of anything. Literally the worst type of exposition. So, already before I read one word of plot, already I'm put off because the world building is just lazy and simple. Also, when you actually read this information, there's a second civil war known as the Heartland War. Okay, that's fine. But it was fought over a single issue. I know we like to radically oversimplify history, but civil wars are not fought over one issue. There might be a central issue or a biggest issue, like slavery was in the Civil War, but there's always more than one issue. You'd never fight over one single thing. So that really got under my craw. But it's fought over abortion, which I know abortion's a hot button topic, but I don't know we'd ever go to war over it. And there are pro-life and pro-choice armies. So let's think about this for a second. Pro-life army. Do I even need to explain this contradiction? The way they solve the Civil War, the basic premise of the novel, is that they pass a bill that says you can't have an abortion, but you can raise a child until they're 13, and between the ages of 13 and 18, you can have the child killed off and have their organs donated. In what universe is this an acceptable middle ground between these two choices? I know pro-choicers and pro-lifers disagree on whether or not a fetus is truly alive and truly has the right to live, but no one's arguing about a teenager's right to have their life. That's just completely ludicrous. It's so dumb. Who agreed to that? Again, I think he thought this would be a cool premise for a book, and if you don't think about it and you just go with it, then the plot's fine. But I can't buy into this premise. It's dumb. I'm sorry. No one's going to accept that. No one, not a pro-choicer or a pro-lifer out there, is going to advocate for the murder of teens, even for the worthwhile issue of organ donation. So that's already dumb, but it says the child's life technically doesn't end because all their body parts live on. Are you kidding me? Really? I don't even want to go into that. If you think organ donation means someone's life lives on, then I just am not going to get through to you. So that all being out there, most of the time there are kind of three different unwinds, which relates to one of each main character. There's the troubled child that the parents just don't want to bother with anymore. There are wards of the state. And then there are something called tithes. Now, of course, tithes are related to the religious practice of tithing, in which you donate 10% of your income to your religious institution. Now, here's the thing. It's explained in this book that you give 10% of everything. Now, I know some religious groups are more conservative and more strict about tithing than others, but most moderate religious groups nowadays say you give 10% of your income if you have disposable income to give. No one's going to blame you or say that you're not worthy of your religion because you're living paycheck to paycheck and you just don't have the money to give. So the idea of giving a tenth of everything is not really correct, at least in my knowledge and my interpretation of tithing, but also it's the fact that people give 10% of their children to tithing for unwinding. What? A lot of pro-choicers are pro-choicers for religious reasons. So what religion is going to advocate killing a teenager and having their organs donated? Unless you had some sort of divine message from God that told you to unwind your child so that you could help someone, most religious groups believe in the sanctity of life, and they're not going to advocate for the killing of a teenager. Again, this premise just doesn't work. And one last thing that drove me nuts is there's a practice in this world called storking. Essentially, storking is when you have a baby and you leave it on someone's doorstep, and if they find the baby and they don't see you, they are legally obligated to keep and take care of the child. Again, what universe? What group of people is going to allow the government to say that someone ding-dong ditching you a baby is okay and that now you're legally obligated to take care of it? No one. That is just completely ludicrous. So if you can't tell already, I don't buy into this idea at all, and it hinders your enjoyment of a novel when the whole premise just doesn't work. But again, if you just turn off your brain and enjoy it, then it's fine, but I can't. So another big issue I have with this book is that it tackles a lot of big issues, and there is seeds of good ideas and great discussions in this book that Neal Shusterman doesn't go into. Hi, slightly less from the past Zach here to correct and talk about things that Zach from further in the past said. Does that make sense? Alrighty, so I'm about to go into my discussion of theming and everything, and I just really want to quickly speed through this section because I was very angry and didn't quite get across the points I wanted to make. Basically what I said leading up to my discussion of themes and messages is that teens are not as well equipped and not as good at analyzing stories as adult readers are, and that's just because they haven't had the time, they haven't learned the tools of the trade. It's not that teens are dumb, but that's just the truth of the matter. So basically, my point going into this is that when it comes to YA books, my thing is you kind of have to be subtly obvious. You have to make sure you fully flush out a theme where teens don't feel like they're being beaten over the head with the topic, but also, you got to make sure you get it out there. And I felt like Neal Shusterman introduced great ideas and didn't go into them at all, and I found that really frustrating. So, Zach, what are you talking about? Let's start with a good example. Towards the end of the book, there's a conversation between two religious characters, and one religious character says, "My beliefs have changed. I don't believe in a God that believes in said thing." And the other character talking says, "I didn't realize that was a choice. Do you think maybe I could believe in that same God?" Beautiful. Great discussion for teens. It doesn't quite hit you over the head, but it still gives you enough to think about, and it makes it obvious what Neal Shusterman is trying to say. Just because your religious institution at large believes this one thing doesn't mean you have to believe in it. You can contextualize and interpret what's being said in religious text and decide for yourself what you think God is for and against. That's a great message for teens, especially in today's world where, progressivism and acceptance and all these things are kind of at war with the conservative side of religion. That's great. I wish there was a lot more of that. So that being said, let's talk about a bad example. Okay, so here's another quote from the book. It says, "Which was worse, Risa often wondered, to have tens of thousands of babies that no one wanted, or to silently make them go away before they were even born. On different days, Risa had different answers." Okay, seed of a good discussion. There's no right answer to the abortion debate. I agree. There's good and bad in both sides, and it's a really complex issue, which annoys me that people are so staunchly to one side or the other. But Neal Shusterman doesn't go into the philosophy of that question. She doesn't reflect on it more throughout the book. I thought this would be a turning point, a point where he introduces this idea and then that character would keep coming back to this idea and developing her position and her thoughts. And she doesn't really. He just introduces this idea and then dips. Go into it. Discuss this. Like, help teens, start processing and deciding for themselves their thoughts on these big issues and big ideas. But again, he just seed of an idea and then dips. Another good example of this. "But they loved God more than they loved me, and I hate them for it. So I guess that means I'm going to hell." There's a great discussion to be had here about over-religious parents and parents that ignore their kids because they feel it's more their responsibility to serve God and not their own offspring. He never goes into it. He leaves that idea alone. There are probably quite a few kids reading this that have this idea, have a further discussion about how, it's not wrong to hate your parents for ignoring you and abusing you with using religion as a shield or as an excuse. That's a great conversation for teens to have, and maybe a discussion that would realize that their parents are abusive and maybe they should cut them off later in their life if they need to, or have a serious discussion with their parents about changing that. This would be great if he went into that further and explained it, but he doesn't. Essentially, he keeps seeding good ideas, but he has a barren field of messages because he doesn't grow any of these seeds into an actual formed theme or commentary. It's lackluster. So those are my major issues. The world building is bad, the premise is just unbelievably flawed, and that he introduces good ideas and themes but doesn't develop them enough to mean anything. Before I go on to my spoiler complaints, I want to give two really quick miscellaneous small complaints that just drove me nuts. One, there's this idea of if you get like a replaced limb, that limb's muscle memory lives on. This is shown in an early scene where a trucker does a card trick and he says, "I never learned card tricks, but the boy I got this arm from did, and the muscle memory still exists." Muscle memory is a cute term, but it refers to the memorization of motor skills, which is developed in the cerebellum, and your muscles have nothing to do with the memory. There's no memories in your muscles. It's all in your brain. I don't know if Neal Shusterman was trying to be cute, or if he thought this would be like a fun idea, or he just wanted to have a moment at the end, which, if you've read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about, which I thought was ridiculous, but whatever. But, in my opinion, it distracts me when you give bad science information in a book that has science fiction elements, and B, you're actively spreading bad information to teens. You're giving them the impression that muscle memory has something to do with their actual muscles when it doesn't. It has to do with motor skills, and it's all in the cerebellum. One other thing that annoyed me in the miscellaneous category was a comment that Moses was a stork. I'm Christian, and that's not how it happened. Moses was abandoned because they didn't want the baby being killed by the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was found and willingly taken in by an Egyptian princess. He was not forced upon the Egyptian princess like storks are in the story, so that comparison does not work. And as a Christian, it kind of pissed me off because, you really are going to just blatantly misrepresent the story for this stupid, dumb storking idea you had in your book? Get out of here. Alright, Zach from the Slightly Less Past back again. And I just real quickly want to correct this because I need to. So I'm about to go into spoilers, and real quick, this is a minor spoiler. It's not really that big of a deal, but I'm going to ask you to stick around because I found this part especially hilarious, and I kind of want to do a bit here, if you will. I know some of you won't find me funny, but I want to try. So there's a bit that they're in an Unwind camp, okay? And there's a band playing, and the band plays Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. Okay, I would have loved this when I was 14. I would have been like, "Ha! It's hilarious! He's playing Don't Fear the Reaper! How clever!" Of course, as an adult, it was kind of groan-worthy and cringy. But I was quickly flipping through the back study material and questions and stuff, and one of these, if I can find it, one of these questions is Put together a set list of songs your band would play if you were performing at a harvest camp. I don't know if Neal Shusterman wrote this or like an intern at Simon & Schuster wrote this, but it was so hilarious, and my thought is, I'm a music guy, I love music, so if you want me to put a hilariously ironic, hilariously dumb set list of songs to perform at an Unwind camp, challenge accepted. So if this is an Unwind camp, I personally don't believe that you're not dying if you get unwound. So I think you're dying, which means you have to put In My Time of Dying by Led Zeppelin on there. You know, it's too perfect not to put on there. Second of all, they say being unwound is painless, so what you're saying is that they're comfortably numb, as in the great Pink Floyd song. You gotta throw that one on the set list. Also, kind of this idea of your spirit living on in these body parts, it kind of sounds like voodoo, so we're gonna throw Voodoo Child Slight Return by Jimi Hendrix on there, because why the f not? Also, you're being cut up into pieces, which means you gotta put Last Resort by Papa Roach on there. After all, the first line is cut my life into pieces. It's too just perfect not to be on there. It's mandatory. Second of all, we're going to talk about people dying. Why not put My Chemical Romance's Welcome to the Black Parade on there? I mean, like, if you're about my age, you were born in the late 90s, early 2000s, I mean, this is just a generation-defining jam, and if they're not going to play it when I'm about to die, then I'm not ready to die. Also, let's just continue. Let's just get more and more ridiculous with these songs. Why not play Already Gone by the Eagles? Because as far as society is concerned, you are already gone. If your spirit's supposed to live on, why don't we play Instant Karma by John Lennon with the line, and we all shine on? Also, why not add Within You Without You by the Beatles, because life will flow on without you, which is almost a line from the song. And then to end off the set list, I'm going to go with a little bit of a deep cut from a band you may or may not have heard of, and it's called Real Big Fish. If you haven't heard of them, please look them up. They're amazing. I love them to death. But they have a song called Another FU Song, which I think, if I'm going to be killed off and all my organs donated, I'm probably going to be singing this song. I'm going to play you a brief snippet of the censored version here.
F living, F dying, F laughing, F crying, F this song, but mostly F you. F everything, but F you the most.
So, you can kind of understand why I put it on here, and, you know, I feel like it would just be just the perfect end to my I'm Dying set list. So there you have it, the perfect, dumb, I'm Dying set list. Seriously though, why did they put Don't Fear the Reaper in there? That's just dumb. Alright, fun time's over. Moving on to serious spoilers. So I was hoping this book would be a balanced look at abortion and kind of say it depends on the person, so it should be pro-choice, because I personally am pro-choice. This book, however, has the statement, you know, we deserve the right to live, you know, we deserve the right to choose life. So I feel like this book's personally pro-life. Can't really say it's a bad thing to be pro-life. I can't hold it against Neal Shusterman or against this book. But I was really hoping he'd end up with basically a you have to make your own decision kind of message. And when he didn't, I was really sad about it. But again, it's his right. It's his right to believe it. It's his right to put it in his book. So that's just how it is. But I have to go over one last thing, and this is very unfun to talk about. If you've read this book, you'll know that there is a scene in which one male character pretends like he's going to sexually assault a female character in the novel in an attempt to see if he can get another male to freak out and challenge him to establish some sort of alpha male pecking order. If you're going to include a scene like this, that's fine. But the discussion around this has to be perfect. And in my opinion, this was anything but. Basically, the claim is made that the second guy was right not to play into the mind games of the other guy, because otherwise that would make him weaker or less than as a man? That is just... I'm usually not a fan of hearing about toxic masculinity because I'm kind of just sick of hearing about it, but that was most definitely toxic masculinity, and I think it really needed a discussion there, and the fact that it didn't... So, anyway, that's that. Taking you back to normal time now. Alright, so as I said earlier, the plot, the characters, if you can buy into the premise, are okay. I think maybe if I was a teenager and I read this, maybe I would have liked it back in the day, but it's definitely the kind of book I would look back on and realize that it was never really that good in the first place. The world building, the premise, and just the small miscellaneous issues just kind of piled up and left me overall feeling unsatisfied and unhappy with this book. My final rating for this is going to be a 2 out of 5. I don't recommend it for teens or adults alike, and I don't think it's good. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. It was my first attempt at doing something a little more analytical without getting angry and drinking. So if you think I did a good job, please let me know, and I will try to do more analytical type videos in the future. If you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see you next time.